Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with the review of a wonderful box on the Carus label, Bach's Sons. It's like Son of Frankenstein. You get Son of Bach, and they've got 4 of them here. This is a wonderful series with the Freiburg Baroque Orchestra, conducted by Gottfried von der Goltz. And wowie, wow, wow. This is really fun, and I want to introduce you to a piece of music on one of these discs that's just extraordinary. So let's open her up. It's 4 discs. You get a beautiful booklet with wonderful notes. And they also, by the way, they're available separately. Here's the C.P.E. Bach one, the separate one, just so you know, in case there's something that interests you particularly and you don't want to get all 4. But we start with, these are in chronological order, Wilhelm Friedemann, who was Bach's oldest son. Wilhelm Friedemann is the one whose daughter married the guy who moved to Oklahoma, taking, I am sure, his share of the missing Bach cantata cycles, which must be sitting in a grain silo somewhere in Oklahoma. So if anyone wants to go over there and look, they should feel free. But anyway, he was a supposed alcoholic and a somewhat disturbed guy, but he was the teacher and dear, dear friend of Sarah Levy. Now, Sarah Levy was Mendelssohn's great aunt, and she was part of the wealthy Jewish community of Berlin that was living under the protection of Friedrich the Great. In fact, her family, I believe, ran the mint, which was a good job to have. They were obscenely wealthy. And Sarah Levy was an amazing artist, an amazing pianist, or clavecinist, harpsichordist. And that whole group of Jewish Berliners had a Bach cult going. They were heavy-duty Bach collectors. Mendelssohn's own father was. Mendelssohn's family was. And they essentially endowed the library of the Berlin Singakademie at the time, at least until, after the turn of the 19th century, until the 1800s, when, all those German nationalists decided that they didn't want to have anything to do with Jews. But up until that point, they were more than happy to take their money and to let them perform. And Sarah Levy did a lot of performance, and she was taught by this guy. And you have here, he was an interesting composer. He doesn't really sound like his dad, but he doesn't really sound like anyone else yet either. He was sort of hovering on the cusp. And you get in this disc his flute concerto, and his symphony in D minor, and a cembalo or harpsichord concerto, and a concerto for 2 harpsichords in E flat with a big orchestra. It's got 2 trumpets, 2 horns, timpani, and strings, which is quite a massive ensemble for a double concerto. So that's Wilhelm Friedemann, and he's definitely worth hearing. He wrote a song for Sarah Levy's wedding, and the reason I bring her up is because she was very friendly with C.P.E. Bach. She collected all of his stuff. She collected Bach manuscripts. It was she who gave Mendelssohn the score of the St. Matthew Passion so that he could do that fabulous revival of Bach revival in the late 1820s, was it, or something like that. And, so she had a lot of Bach. She had some music library. She really did. And C.P.E. wrote his last 3 quartets for her, which are actually for flute and strings and keyboard. They're delightful works. Oh my God, they're wonderful. I did a talk on how C.P.E. Bach influenced Haydn, but at the end of his life, it was kind of the other way around. And that makes things terribly interesting, as you'll hear in a moment. So on this one, you have the symphony in E minor, which is absolutely scary in its first movement, and the cello concerto in B, B flat actually in this case because it's Deutsch, and the oboe concerto in B flat, and finally, and most interestingly, this is one of the great unique creations in the whole history of 18th century music, and C.P.E. wrote it in the last few months of his life for Sarah Levy. They think it was a commission for her. It's a double concerto for harpsichord, piano, and orchestra. Now, there is no double concerto for harpsichord and piano until like Frank Martin in the 1940s after this. That's how strange and unusual this was. But what makes it even more fun is just how delightful the music is. Oh my goodness, it's funny, it's witty, it's sensual, it's glittering, it's just the most amazing piece of music. I want you to hear it. I'm going to hold up this one actually because it's on this single C.P.E. Bach disc in this series, so you should just know that it exists. I mean, Carus does such a beautiful job with these things. Listen to a bit of the finale of the double concerto for harpsichord and piano, or forte piano in this case, in this deliciously tangy period instrument performance. It's just unbelievably marvelous. Here you go. Isn't that striking? And what it tells us, aside from the fact that it's marvelous in and of itself, is that C.P.E. Bach was somebody who never ceased to evolve. He was like Haydn in that respect. His works show a steady, forward, marching impulse or evolution, and it's always interesting. Always. But that's one of the great curiosities and masterpieces, too. It's not just, something bizarre, but it's something bizarre that works from the 18th century. And I wanted you to hear a bit of it. I just wanted you to know that it's out there. Now, son number 3 is Johann Christoph Friedrich Bach, who's, I think, the least familiar of all of them. And you get on this particular disc a sinfonia in G major in 8 parts, which is really lovely. It starts with a largo, then a romanza, then a minuet, then a rondo. It's quite a serious piece, 25 minutes long. Then a concerto grosso at E flat for piano forte, 2 oboes, 2 horns, 2 violins. Really extraordinary stuff. And finally, a symphony in 10 parts with flute, 2 horns, bassoon, 2, what are these things? Oh, I just knocked them over. Well, Okay, 2 clarinets, pardon me, and strings. Clarinets, yay! We get clarinets. They're happening. Another big 4-movement work. And these are extraordinarily interesting pieces that nobody much knows. So they're worth hearing. His dates, by the way, were 1732 to 1795. So he was around for a while. Meanwhile, these have all fallen all over the place. Well, I'll pick them up in a second. And last but not least, there's the other one we know about, Johann Christian Bach, who was J.C. Bach, the London Bach, who Mozart knew and supposedly learned from, the guy whose style was galant. The galant style, pleasing, cheerful, delightful, delicious, lovely, that kind of stuff. Some people consider it frothy and frilly and lightweight and completely uninteresting, as if they could do better. Let's just say he wasn't popular with the Darmstadt crowd and leave it at that. And this disc contains the overture to Il Tutore e la Pupilla, the tutor and the pupil, which is delicious, a little three-movement symphony, really. And then you have the Sinfonia Concertante. He was big on the Sinfonia Concertante. He sort of like invented those. A Sinfonia Concertante is a symphony that has solo parts for various instruments. And so this is for 2 solo violins and 2 oboes, 2 horns, and regular strings. And then there's a symphony in G, his Opus 6, number 1. He was one of the pioneers of symphonic writing. And we have his concerto for flute in D. There's so many flute concertos from this period. Oh my goodness, so many of these suckers. And then another symphony from the Opus 6 series, or this is Opus 8, his Opus 8 batch, number 4. These are 3-movement, tiny, charming works. But they're very, very nice. And so, they're all very, very well done. But let me try and find this. Hang on a minute. There we go. Okay, I got it. We're back where we ought to be. Yes, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm putting them all back and just suggesting that either you get all 4 in one beautiful box called Die Bach-Söhne, Bach's Sons, there it is, with the Freiburg Baroque Orchestra, or just get them individually, but do get the C.P.E. Bach one with the double concerto. Oh my goodness, that is such a cool piece of music. It just makes me happy to be alive. Whenever I hear it, it is so imaginative and just so timbrally fascinating. But it's also funny and witty, and it's, C.P. Bach's known for being like dark and miserable and emotional. But this is just the opposite. This is like Haydn. This has wit, genuine wit, and the wit is timbral wit. It's from the contrast of sound of the 2 keyboard instruments. Oh, it's just amazing. Anyway, keep on listening. Thank you for joining me. Get your Sons of Bach and take care.